For the rest of the day, hazy, hot, and humid. Scattered thunderstorms developing by mid-afternoon, high 91 to 95. Cooler along the shore. The Friday outlook partly sunny and warm, but less humid, high Friday in the mid-80s. Some victims of pollution in Japan have been awarded compensation for their afflictions. Andrew Adams has details in Tokyo.
A Japanese district court awarded nearly $160,000 in compensation to 31 surviving victims of a cadmium pollution disease called itai. The historic decision was handed down by the Toyama District Court against the Mitsui Mining and Smelting Company, marking the first time relief has ever been offered to pollution victims here. It is expected to have far-reaching effects on the outcome of pending cases involving victims of mercury poisoning and asthma allegedly derived from sulfuric dioxide. The Health and Welfare Ministry announced 3 years ago that the so-called ouch-ouch disease was caused by cadmium poisoning. The plaintiffs had blamed Mitsui for continuously discharging wastewater containing cadmium and other heavy metals into the upper reaches of the Jinsu River. A verdict came nearly 3 years and 3 months after the suit was filed. This is Andrew Adams for CBS News in Tokyo.
There's one problem we all have in common: air pollution. Find out what you can do about it from your Tuberculosis and Respiratory Disease Association. This announcement is brought to you as a public service by WCBS News Radio 88.
If you want to get something off the ground to or from Australia, the South Pacific, the world, there's just one reservation's number to call. Ours, Qantas Air Cargo. In Minneapolis, the number to call is
800-227-0290, Qantas Air Cargo.
In Philadelphia, the number to call is
800-227-0290, Qantas Air Cargo.
In Detroit, the number to call is
800-227-0290, Qantas Air Cargo.
In Atlanta, the number to call is
800-227-0290, Qantas Air Cargo.
Wherever you are, the number to call is
800-227-0290.
800-227-0290.
Qantas Air Cargo to Australia, the South Pacific, the world.
Time is 7 minutes before 2 on WCBS News Radio. A staff counsel for the New York State Public Service Commission testified yesterday that if a proposal to deny electricity to any new building in Manhattan is adopted, it would be what he called a grave disruption to the city's economic life. Howard Reed, counsel for the PFC staff, made his comments at the public hearing considering an interim order of 23 proposed emergency steps to be taken in the event of a power crisis. Besides the 23 steps, 2 issues that caused controversy at the hearing involved additional proposals outlined by PSC Commissioner William Jones to deal with power emergencies. The first stated that, if necessary, electricity would be shut off on selected large commercial buildings, including stores, offices, and factories in any of the 5 boroughs. The second proposal stated that until Con Edison is assured of an adequate power supply, it will not be allowed to provide electricity to any new building for which a building permit or equivalent governmental approval is obtained after today. Yesterday, Con Ed put into effect the 3% voltage reduction. The utility took the action because of high temperatures, the tight power situation in the Northeast, and the breakdown of a 340,000 kilowatt unit in Astoria. The utility said it was not a panic situation, that the 3% voltage reduction yesterday was not even noticeable. A new experiment in education called the Systems Approach, which allows a student to study at his own pace, was unveiled this past year in one of the junior colleges that make up the City University of New York. WCBS reported on the college at its opening, and now we're back for another look. Here with the first in a series of reports is Bill Fahan.
Hostos Community College is a stepchild of the City University of New York College Complex, a center of learning in the South Bronx for Puerto Ricans and blacks who make up about 90% of the total enrollment. William Laidlow was Dean of Faculty when Hostos opened last September. At that time, he had this comment on what he expected from the upcoming school year.
We're in no sense experimenting. We're using sound principles in the design of curriculum of an academic program that, in our best professional judgment, leads us to predict that we'll be more successful with any student population than the traditional approach has been.
The college is housed in the factory building on the Grand Concourse in the middle of the pressure cooker street politics of the South Bronx. Black Panthers and Young Lords tried to organize on campus. The pounding of jackhammers echoed through the buildings as classes were in session. There was no library, cafeteria, or student lounge. a series of demonstrations and an attempted student takeover triggered the resignation of the president. Now, 10 months later, Dean Laidlow speaks with the added authority of hindsight.
We probably, would have been physically better prepared to open. In terms of our basic instructional plant, having materials better tied in with the needs of our students and with their skill deficiencies. We certainly, would have spent a little more effort, considerable more effort on the structure of internal governance to make sure that participation was real in policy decisions in advance. And then I'm sure if we had it to do over again, would have spent a good deal more time on orientation.
Many members of the faculty also went through some changes this year. Barry Castro, chairman of the Social Sciences Department.
I feel that we've learned in a more gut way than we knew at the beginning of the year to identify with our students that they're the people we're serving, and that serving them requires questioning things that come down from above in a more serious way than we're used to questioning them. We've learned how even the most liberal of us have a real predisposition to be kind of clubby with each other and nice to each other and excusing of each other's errors, and much more condemning of the errors that kids get into, even when our errors are enormously more serious. We've learned that while they can feel frustration very strongly, their inability to be as articulate as we can be about frustration doesn't obviate the problems they're talking about, that we need to help them to get through, to get more clarity on those problems and more clarity with how they deal with them. In an important way, that's our function as teachers.
Hostos lost at least 1/5 of its students during the year, but the college maintains the majority left for personal reasons, not because of the year-long turmoil. And Hostos officials point to one fact that they claim is unique in the history of a junior college. Acting President Edward Aponte.
We have a surprise for the world in that we're going to have graduates in the first year.
In our next report, we'll be taking a look at the opening 10 months of Hostos from a student point of view. This is Bill Fahan.
An evenly divided Supreme Court has declared unconstitutional Connecticut's law for dispersing $6 million to aid parochial and other private schools. The court said the assistance violates the First Amendment, separating church and state. Checking local weather now. Partly cloudy, 81 degrees in Midtown Manhattan. Southwest wind at 8 miles an hour, humidity 72%. THI 78, barometer 29.97, steady. Overnight forecast, warm and muggy with some patches of fog, low 68 to 74. Rest of the day, hazy, hot and humid. Scattered thunderstorms by mid-afternoon, high 91 to 95, but cooler along the shore.
This is CBS in New York, WCBS News Radio 88.
This is Julie Harris. There's probably never been a baby robin who leapt out of the nest by himself, and the mother robin who gives her fledgling the nudge has a lesson for the mothers and families of children who are blind or nearly blind. Your child won't reach out for a world he can't see. You'll have to nudge him into it. Encourage him with sounds and textures. Stimulate him to smell and taste and reach out for the world. If he has some sight, he can only learn to use it if you give him a loving nudge. Not as drastic as Mama Robin's, maybe, but remember, without her, the fledgling would never learn to fly, and without your nudges, your blind child's world could remain as small as the length of his arms. Help him learn to fly, and let the American Foundation for the Blind help you do it. Write the American Foundation for the Blind, Box 111, New York 10011.
When you hear the tone, it will be exactly 2 o'clock. This is Palmer Payne with Bruno Wasserteil and Jim McCarthy. New York Times and Washington Post publishing further details from once secret Pentagon study of Vietnam. $1 million shortage in books of South Bronx Community Center causes federal agency to cut off its funds. CIA director meets with senior Israeli officials, details lacking. Man killed after shooting Joseph Colombo, quoted by girlfriend as saying New Jersey underworld was after him. Leaders of both major national parties agree lowering a voting age to 18 achieved last night can have a decisive effect. Defense rests in Newark federal extortion conspiracy trial of 8 Jersey City and Hudson County politicos. This is continuous news from CBS. The Vietnam War series that resumed in this morning's editions of the New York Times says the Pentagon study shows President John Kennedy transformed the Eisenhower administration Vietnam gamble into a broad commitment. It's the first account since the Times was muzzled on June 15th. The paper also recounts in detail the Kennedy administration's part in the military coup that overthrew South Vietnam's President Diem in 1963. The Pentagon analysts said although President Kennedy resisted pressures for putting U.S. ground troops into South Vietnam, he took a series of actions that expanded American military and political involvement in that country. The Times says President Kennedy made his first fresh commitments to Vietnam secretly. It says the study reveals in the spring of 1961, the President ordered 400 Special Forces troops and 100 other American military advisors sent to South Vietnam. The paper said no publicity was given to either move. The news ban on the controversial classified war reports was lifted yesterday when the Supreme Court voted 6-3 to allow publication. The Washington Post has printed 3 more installments based on the once secret war study. One of the stories describes a concern said to be shared by the Kennedy and Johnson administrations in 1963 and 64 that the United States might be forced out of Vietnam without victory by what were termed pro-French factions in Saigon seeking a neutralist peace. The Pentagon Vietnam Papers, leaked to newsmen by Alaska Senator Mike Gravel, show the late Robert Kennedy tried vainly to initiate a reappraisal of U.S. purposes in Vietnam. The history says Kennedy even proposed possible withdrawal after failure of a 1963 plot against South Vietnamese President Diem. In the documents, Pentagon analysts say Robert Kennedy introduced a discussion at a National Security Council meeting on the fundamental purpose of American involvement in Vietnam. It was held 1 week after an American-sanctioned coup against Diem had collapsed, and less than 2 months later, Diem was ousted and then murdered. The U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development reports a South Bronx Community Service Center has had federal funds suspended as a result of an audit which showed $1 million missing. The Hunts Point Multi-Service Center Incorporated on Caldwell Avenue had funds suspended for payment of salaries to its employees as well as money for their administrative expenses, according to a statement released by Regional Administrator William Green. The Hunts Point Agency is part of a federally sponsored program known as the Neighborhood Services Program and provides a variety of health services as well as employment counseling, family daycare, and other social services. The director of the U.S. Central Intelligence Agency, Richard Helms, has met with senior Israeli officials. Informed sources say his purpose was to investigate the involvement of Soviet intelligence in the Middle East. However, there are no details on Helms' shadowy visit. The Foreign Ministry spokesman said Helms met with Premier Golda Meir, Defense Minister Moshe Dayan, and Foreign Minister Abba Eban. The CIA chief arrived 3 days ago. At first, officials tried to prevent any publication of his trip. The United States Embassy spokesman said, "I have no information on the subject." Arabs who stand to be compensated for the Israeli confiscation of their lands are not entirely happy about the situation, as we hear in this report from Bruno Wasserteil in Tel Aviv.
There's mixed reaction among East Jerusalem Arabs to a new law under which they stand to gain a total of $100 million in property reparations from Israel. Some of the prospective claimants are saying that the evaluation of their property should be made at today's prices and not the values that existed in 1948 when the first Arab-Israeli war divided them from their real estate. Under the compensation formula, Israel will pay the 1948 book value of the properties plus an increment of from 25 to 50%. Another criticism is that most of the claims will be paid in 20 annual installments. And many Arabs say that under those conditions, they'll never live to see all of their compensation money. On the other hand, there are numerous private expressions of satisfaction by Arabs who had long ago written off the property they had in Israel as a dead loss. Bruno Wasserteil for CBS News in Tel Aviv.
In Manhattan, Jerome Johnson, the suspected gunman who shot and critically wounded Joseph Colombo Sr., was reported yesterday to have told a girlfriend recently the underworld in New Jersey was after him. That reported conversation was revealed by Chief of Detectives Albert Seidman, who said he spoke to the unidentified woman last Monday evening. Seidman told newsmen the young woman told him Johnson, whose home was originally in New Brunswick, New Jersey, referred on several occasions to the mafia in that state, and on one occasion said the mafia was after him. She told Seidman nothing else was mentioned. He was unable to determine what Johnson meant by after him. Seidman also displayed a photograph taken seconds before Colombo was shot last Monday, showing Johnson taking movies of Colombo at a very close distance. Seidman said the photograph was taken from a movie film, one of several police had of the scene before the shooting. Seidman says progress is being made in determining who shot Johnson to death. Asked whether the police had positive identification of Johnson's assailant, Seidman hesitated and replied, "I can't answer that question." Police questioned 2 more men yesterday in connection with the case. Carmine the Snake Persico and one of his associates, Hugh Apples McIntosh.